Hey all, Josh here, and this is my review of Gamera vs. Gyaos, the third film in the Gamera franchise, and this is the third film to be released by Shout Factory, who, as many of you probably know from watching my earlier reviews, or that if you're watching this review at all, you're likely aware of, that Shout Factory is releasing the first 8 of these original Gamera films on DVD. This one, in fact, comes with a double feature of Gamera vs. Virus, which I'll be reviewing very shortly. To start, though, it really isn't much necessary to go over the story of this movie. Suffice to say that this movie is really the beginning of the turning point in the Gamera franchise, much in the same way that original Godzilla movies were meant more for adults. Gamera movies less so, but still, that same bent. And yet, both franchises start to kind of fall into more kid-centric fare, and this is really the beginning of that. It really comes full sway in the fourth movie, but in the third film, it's still fairly well balanced out with the rest of the plot that, while noticeable, it's not terribly distracting. But again, though, because of this, the story itself is not very complicated. A company is trying to build an expressway through this one center of Japan. The village doesn't want it built, as always. They either want more money or want to maintain their land, one of the two, and usually these kind of plots. And as mentioned before, the movie does involve one kid who is part of this village, who is kind of the friend of Gamera that Gamera has to save at one point in the film. The rest of the film, however, is taken up by this kind of monster battle between Gamera and Gyaos, and as with Gamera vs. Baragon, there really is some interesting tactics here. One thing I must note, though, is that the tactics used on part by the military are, in a word, ridiculous. They literally make absolutely no sense. I won't spoil how ridiculously silly their plot is to defeat Gyaos, but it's almost as bad as the Gamera the Giant Monster, where they have the giant Gamera-sized spaceship just lying about. It's kind of fun in a campy way, though, this one is, rather than just outright embarrassingly silly. And it really doesn't detract from the experience so much, considering the fact that there is actually some pretty good monster battles in this. It's kind of gory, it's pretty ingenious as some of the moves that they do, and again, Gamera is much more vulnerable than Godzilla and has to rely more on tactics to defeat the other monster, which is greatly appreciated. You'll notice that I've kind of stopped with story discussion because that's about as far as it goes. Honestly, most of the characters don't really do anything except repeat various phrases like, oh hey, this is the name of the monster from the kid, and the expressway guy, okay, let's stake out the place. I'm not leaving work until they tell me to, despite there being a giant monster. It's really just giving the audience a view of the giant monster in that scene. But that's, again, you really just have to expect it from this type of movie. This movie is not really made in a time when giant monster movies are the most sophisticated thing, and they don't necessarily need to be. For me, giant monster movies can work on many levels, two of the main ones being either just fun and really serious, actual good movies. Yeah, this one is definitely more of the former, though. The characters are throwaway, but the main characters that you're looking for, Gamera and Gyaos, are front and center. That's how it should be. Now, I do actually want to spend a couple minutes talking about the effects here, because there's some really interesting effects put on here. They have Gyaos have this razor-sharp laser that he can shoot, and that's his main form of attack. And this actually leads to a ton of really hilarious scenes of him cutting things in half, almost surgically, where there's a research plane flying over top of him, and he'll shoot his laser at it and cut it in half, and the plane will just kind of slide apart. I guess none of that suction shit. But anyway. And he has one scene where there's three people in a car, and two are on one side, the driver's side, and the other reporters taking pictures of Gyaos at the other. And Gyaos cuts the car in half, and half of the car where the reporter is just kind of stops dead in the road, and the other two people are still driving along. And there's just a lot of funny stuff like that. And this kind of razor-sharp laser, it's kind of hard to say, does provide an adequate threat to Gamera that you feel like this monster could cause some serious damage. There's actually some really great destruction scenes in this of Gyaos just kind of wreaking havoc in mainland Japan, Tokyo. I really gotta say that I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. It's really silly, and there's some really kind of weird logistic gaps. Like if the car was cut in half, why are the tires still work? Why was the frame not cut down, I mean, if it's that razor sharp, you'll understand what I'm saying. Or at one point, Gamera puts a kid on his back, and you see from a top-down perspective from his shell, and then clearly his arm reaching from the top right of the screen, flat, mind you, the palm of his hand is facing downwards, putting a kid on his shell. And you think to yourself, how do your arms bend that way, really? But all of this aside, this movie is a lot of fun, it's ridiculous, but there are some really cool monster scenes in it, and really that's what you're coming for. The suit work is clearly a lot cheaper. This entire movie is a lot cheaper than Gamera vs. Baragon was, but again, being turned into kid fare, this really is the descent of the budget. You're gonna have to expect that throughout the following movies, but this one is still definitely worth checking out if you like giant monster movies.